Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. I'll watch it on Facebook as well. So there was no thing last week because Andy was doing a session. Let me just go into the sorry, people messaging me. Let me just go. Right, sorry, just I just want to make sure because I don't see everybody watching in the comments on here for some reason. So I've got to set it up on my phone as well so I can actually see all the comments and stuff. We've got quite a few questions. We've got like 2 weeks worth of questions today. So we're going to get through all of these. For those who don't know, I've got a training this weekend. A space has become available. So if you're new or returning, you can just drop me a message or you can just see the website. All the information on how to book is on there. Okay, so let's go through these questions. If you have any other questions, please just put them into the chat and I will do my best to give you some sort of answer. So, when someone has suicidal thoughts, do you immediately refer this person to a psychologist or do you apply IEMT? If anybody to me mentions suicide ideation, or anything like that, I do not work with them. I am not qualified to work with them, and I certainly do not want somebody to commit suicide and I then have that on my conscience. So remember, what I would do is I would always take the term IEMT out of when you're asking something like this and say, can I work on this? Okay, so not IEMT, but can I work on this client? Can I work on this? IEMT is a set of tools. It's a set of tools and it's a set of techniques, and it works in many different ways. And the ability to use these is not down to just the experience of using the IEMT tools. It's down to the qualifications and the training of the practitioner who's also using them. So if you're doing suicide prevention work and you're a trained counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, mental health worker, or something like that, using IEMT in these circumstances might be beneficial. I don't know. Probably not. You probably have to be qualified in this, maybe medically qualified psychologist, psychiatrist. So if somebody comes to me and in the application form for working with me, they mention suicide, I simply reply, I'm sorry, I'm not able to work with anybody with suicide ideation. I sometimes send them links to suicide crisis, stuff like that. I don't refer them to a psychiatrist myself, I refer them to their GP. If they're in the UK, just to their GP. And then basically I then have nothing to do with it myself. So again, IEMT, it's a set of tools, it's a set of techniques. It's like having some spanners and some screwdrivers. For some people, you can make an IKEA chest of drawers. For some people, you can work on a Ferrari. It's the same tools. It depends on the quality of the training, and I don't mean the IEMT training. I mean your personal training in your certifications, your qualifications, those kind of things. So yeah, if anybody says to me they feel suicidal, I do not touch. I have had people who are therapists and coaches who've worked with people who are suicidal and they have committed suicide, and it's been awful for them. The thing is, if you work in therapy, if you work with depressed people, suicide unfortunately is a real factor. Can IMT be used for OCD? Where a certain experience caused the OCD to start? I'm guessing yes, but I thought I'd check. Maybe. Now, the thing is, if somebody has a clinical diagnosis of OCD, I find it unlikely that a single incident has caused this issue. I'm guessing there's more to it than that. So the thing is, it's hard for me to say, yes or no, because I don't know what care this person's already receiving, any kind of medications that they're on, the doctors, the nurses, the care team that they're working with. Um, I personally don't work with somebody with a clinical diagnosis. So, because I'm not really qualified to do so. So, if somebody comes to me with a clinical diagnosis and under the care of somebody else, unless I'm working in conjunction with that person to do something specific, then it's nothing to do with me, really, is it? So can it be used for a certain experience of causing the OCD to start? Again, it might do. It might do, but I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as you get the client to think about this memory, you move their eyes, and now they don't have OCD. I think there's going to be a lot more to it than that. I wish mental health conditions were that easy to work with. So again, I don't know. I cannot give you a direct yes or no answer. I don't know the client. I don't know their history. And I don't know if they're under the care of somebody else, and if they've been clinically diagnosed with OCD, or if they say they have OCD because they believe they have OCD. Okay. I think I've written this one twice, haven't I? Yes, I have. Let me take that last one off. Sorry, because I actually get questions from multiple sources, and I try and collate them all, and sometimes I double up on them. So you mentioned that not everyone gets the I, me, self, you, and that men tend to be less likely to get it. So what do you do on these occasions instead? I'm practicing, and the last person couldn't get it. They understood the explanation but couldn't pick up the location, etc. Well, I mean, they did one round with difficulty, but they couldn't really feel anything else after that, just blank. Right, okay. So, from my experience, from my experience, when I work with clients, men both tend to prefer learning in the training about the memory and emotional side of stuff because it tends to have a scale. It's like 1 to 10. It's there or it's not. It's more of a digital kind of system, binary system. And women tend to prefer the identity stuff because it's more kind of conceptual, it's kind of bigger idea kind of work. Now, these are very broad brushstrokes. Now, when I'm explaining the I, me, self, you setup, this is how I kind of determine it when practitioners ask me these things. If you're working with a range of people and one or two people don't quite understand it and then it doesn't really work for them, then that's probably something about the client. If you're doing the I, me, self, you work and a lot of people, or more than an outlier, are having experience or not getting it, then it's to do with the practitioner and the way that you're setting it up and trying to do it. The first thing I would do is watch the demo which I provide for you on your training at least 5 times, at least 5 times, in terms of the setup and then the application. Now, some people won't get it at all. It just won't mean anything. They won't be able to connect in with it. And so at this point, I would do something different. Now, it's hard for me to say what I would do in this process at this time because I don't know what's wrong with the client. I don't know what symptoms that they're presenting. I might go back to doing sort of more emotional work, more kind of memory work. I might try to see if there's any other identity work which they can get, which I can regress them to being the first time I can remember being this way. So just forgetting the I, me, self, you, and just trying to do some of the complex or the other identity work. I might do some hypnosis. I might do some metaphors of movement. So it really depends. It really depends on where I would take it, depending on who the client is, their history, and what we're really kind of trying to achieve there. But what I don't do is I don't really labor something. And if somebody doesn't understand something, and if they're not going to get it, I do move on and I'll try and do something else to try and help them. How much should I be charging for sessions? Well, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. If you're doing pure IEMT, it depends on several factors. Are you doing them online or in person? Because if you're doing them in person, you're also going to have to factor in room hire, also your time, travel, stuff like this. So I do all my sessions online. When I used to work in London, I used to work in several locations. I worked on Harley Street for a little while, didn't like it there. I also worked at Tooley Street, which is just near Tower Bridge and London Bridge. Um, and I worked there for ages, actually. I did hundreds of sessions there. Now, if I'm doing a single session of therapy in London, that's at least 3.5 hours of my time. Because I've got to travel into London, I've got to get to the clinic, I need to set things up, I need to wait for the client to arrive, do my hour session, then do a bit of note taking and stuff afterwards. I usually did that somewhere else or just in the canteen area. Then I have to travel home. So 1 hour is actually 3.5, possibly 4 hours of my time. So that's one thing to factor. If you're doing it online, then your overheads are, I wouldn't say zero. You've got your internet to pay for, you've got Zoom to pay for, you've got, other web services, things like that, webcams, headsets. So you do have these kind of costs. However, it is much cheaper to do things online. So that's one thing to kind of consider. You then want to consider what service you're providing and who are you providing it to. If you're purely providing IEMT, then people can then sort of price match you and compare you with other people. And some people just want to go for the cheapest, like get the cheapest quote. Um, what I advise you to do is to create some kind of system, some kind of service that can only be delivered by you. So some kind of service that can only be delivered by you. And that will fuse IEMT with other things that you're trained in. So that might be coaching, CBT, counseling, whatever it might be. And it can only be delivered by you. So I can't tell you what to charge because I don't know who you're working with. So when I'm working with people, I have a certain rate for when I'm doing one-to-one sessions. But then I also have done corporate work as well, and that involves me flying to another country and working with corporate clients. And that's a lot more than my hourly standard rate because I've got to actually fly to somewhere. I've got to go to Berlin or Istanbul or somewhere, which has been very nice to do, but it's very different. Now, if you're wanting to work, say, with women who are recovering from abusive relationships and are trying to recover, from that and have moved out of their husband or boyfriend or whatever it might be home and they don't have any money and stuff, they're not going to have 150, £200 for a therapy session, are they? They've got other things to prioritize like rent and food and clothing for children and that kind of stuff. However, if you're working with entrepreneurs and helping them with procrastination and productivity, whatever they've probably got a lot more money. So it's hard for me to say you should charge this amount because I don't know who you're working with. I don't know what services you're actually providing. And your level of experiences and the amount of testimonials, case studies, reviews, interviews, can you really prove that you can deliver and provide what you're claiming? So if you look at my reviews and testimonials, I provide overwhelming evidence that I can provide what I'm saying I can provide. And what I can provide is a very competent IEMT practitioner training with what I consider to be a very high level of aftercare. And I prove this in many ways, but mainly through video, mainly through testimonials, case studies, and reviews. Can you do the same for your service? Okay. When a person has a problem with somebody, what should we do first? Work on the memory? Well, what memory? Is it have they had an argument or something? I don't know what you mean there. Then emotion if needed, and then complex identity of the other people. Of the other people. I think that just might be a bit of a translation thing there. So I think it's the other person is what they mean. So if somebody has a problem with somebody else, well, first of all, I don't know who this person is and what their relationship is. So I don't really know that. However, I'll give you some scenarios and how I would do it because I want to actually give you some structure for this. So say that you had an office situation and you had a co-worker that this person didn't like and they don't get on with them. You can certainly do the external or the other person identity work. So when they think about this person, what comes to mind, bring it out, make it 3D, do the lazy 8 so they can get some distance and perspective from that person. When they think about that person now, does it set off any emotional, any kind of kinesthetic response? If so, yes, you can certainly do the identity, the emotional stuff on there, sorry. You can also do maybe the identity of the person who's being affected. Why aren't they standing up for themselves? So you can even do an I, me, self, you identity work there. You can also look at the language which the person is presenting. I hate this person. She makes me feel like this. She makes me feel worthless. She makes me hate myself, whatever. So I'd look at the language. So it's not, I can't just tell you exactly what to do. So I'd listen to the language that's being presented and where I'd then make the interventions from there. But basically, you are sort of on the right lines. I'd do the identity of the other person, then look at any emotions and then identity stuff. If there has been a specific incident or specific inc incidents, yeah, yeah, you can work on those as well. So I would do, basically I'd do a mix. But again, it would depend on what's actually being presented, what are the actual problems. I had two persons that on the kinesthetic algorithm repeated the same memory at age 2 or 3. Then I asked, and when is the first time you remember feeling this way now? The feeling score went below 3 at the end. Okay, so let's just break that up. Okay. And I always told when moving the fingers to hold on to that memory for as long as you can, but should it change and go to anything else, that's fine. Yeah. So yeah, that's what everything seems good. In your experience, does this mean something about the person? No. Like it's a more analytical or rational person? No. Is it a fixed ideas person or a person with a great memory, etc.? No. Uh, Generally, what you find is that when you're moving somebody's eyes, a few different things can happen. So say you get a feeling of 8, we go to the first imprint, let's just call it the car. You get them to hold that experience, hold that memory for as long as they can. Now, often they'll get a perceptual shift change, a different understanding of that memory, or something else will happen. More memories will come flooding through, as well as that memory. More memories will kind of come through. And both of these things can happen. Or one of these things can happen, or both of these things can happen. And it doesn't mean anything about the person. It's not IMT is not diagnostic. Okay, so it doesn't mean anything about that person. And don't worry about what would you do if that person's an analytical person. What's it going to change what you're doing anyway? It doesn't really factor in, does it? Another question is, so what my advice here is, don't overcomplicate things. Stick to the process. Another question in the simple identity pattern, and also to go back, sometimes it can go back to the same memory. That does happen. Another question is in the simple identity pattern to the I, me, self view. After completing the table and writing down the ages for each identity, I proceed with a lazy 8, just like you put in the manual. I want you to once again think of I. It's located in your, yeah. I want you to go back to the first time you can remember being this way. When you can hold this, allow your eyes to open. When I move your eyes, allow anything to come to mind and hold on to that way of being with that age and things going on around. Okay. Should we ask, I want you to go back to the first time. Should we ask, I want you to go back to the first time you can remember being this way? I think it would be confusing, especially if the person said previously the identity has an age superior to her current age, like the common one on you. Or when moving the eyes, doesn't matter what the age and memory of experiencing of the identity, but focusing on the first memory they remember, behaving the same way as an experience and age they reported. Right, okay, let me try and break this down. I don't really understand what's going on here. Okay, so First of all, they're saying, so you get the information, the location, the age, and the experience, yeah? You get that, and then when you're going to work on it, when you're ready to work on it, you get them to close their eyes. This is what I do. Okay, this is what I do. I get them to close their eyes. Okay, when you think about the identity of I, it's in your head, whatever age, whatever experience. Now, if they've given me, say I'm working with somebody who's 40 and the age is 23, which they've given me, generally what I want to do is I want them to go back to being 23. That's what I'm trying to achieve there. So I do just directly say this. I want you to go back to being this age. Go back to being the first time you remember being this way. Go back to being 23. Now, if the age is older than their current age, then they can't go back to that. So I just want them to hold this experience. Okay, I want to hold this way of being. I want to hold this ageless, this noise around. Just hold that. Just hold that. Obviously, because they can't go backwards. They can't go back to something if it's an ageless or if it's in the future. So just hold the basically the representation which they then therefore have for that. Or when moving the eyes doesn't matter what the age, memory, or experience of the identity, but focusing on the first memory. It's not really a memory that we're going back to. So when we're doing the kinesthetic pattern, we're going back to quite precise moments. With identity work, it tends to be general, like the age of 23. So what I do is I want them to go back to being this way and holding on to this way of being, just basically holding on to what this representation really is for them. Again, I think what we're doing here is overcomplicating the process. I give you the exact words and the exact structure, and the best thing to do is to follow that. If so, why don't we ask in the beginning when we complete the table, I want you to go back to the first time you can remember being this way and then doing the elicitation from the right. And the reason is that because that is not the structure. I cannot give you a reason why we don't do that. I can sort of understand what you're saying there, but that's not the structure. So my advice, once again, would be to follow the actual structure, to do it the way the reason why we do it in the way that we do it is because it's been done thousands of times and we've sort of reported back and shared the experience, and that is what we have found to work best. Okay. So with the I, me, self, you, do the elicitation of the I, me, self, you, work out what you're going to work on, then look at those things, get them to associate in, go back to the first time they can remember being this way, generally to the age which they've actually given you. That's what I'm trying to get to with that. If they have not given you an age or the ages in future, just hold the experience, hold the representation of what that is. Another question, in your IEMT, sorry, did someone just post something? Right, okay, right. I'll get to these questions in a sec. Another question. In your IMT phobia class, you said that in your second round of eye movements, hold on to the memory for as long as you can, but should it change to go, is this applicable for phobias, or are you basically, every time I just work on a memory, the first time I just hold on to this memory, hold on to this memory. Then if I ever have to repeat that, I always say, hold on to this memory for as long as you can. And I always do that with the kinesthetic pattern as well. So basically, in fact, in the kinesthetic pattern, I always just say hold on for as long as you can on the imprint. When it's a standout memory, so if I'm doing the simple or the introductory pattern, I'll get them in the first round, hold, 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 hold. If I repeat it, hold for as long as you can. Should it move to anything else, just allowed to do so. I've been meaning to ask you this, but I probably know the answer. One of my case studies asked if you can do IEMT on yourself. I suspect it may be one of your one-word answers, or perhaps I'm missing something, and there's something more to it. I had a client at 10, so I might not be all right. You can in a bit. You can in a bit. I think if you're working on yourself, I think there's better things to do. In fact, I don't have a ball, and who do I? Teaching them the throwing techniques, that kind of stuff, is probably better. You can do the eye, there's nothing to stop somebody doing the eye movements on themselves, but the thing is, when you're doing IEMT, you're guiding the person to the correct imprints, and you're going to get the best changes going to the imprint memories and working on those imprint memories. So I would highly advise to work with somebody rather than trying to do it on yourself. You'll tend to get a bit confused or a bit dismissive of where these imprints might be. But when you're working with somebody, you're actually working with them, you're guiding them to the right things. And how do you calibrate yourself? You you can't, because you are you. So there are things with the episodic time model and the PSACs, they work really well on your own. Doing the lazy eight on your own, I think, would be very hard. Um, so you can, but it's not a substitute for having, somebody who's experienced actually working with you. So it's a one-word answer. It's yes, sort of. I had a client recently, and when I was doing the eye movements, she struggled to follow with her eyes, and making me say, and me saying, hold on to the memory. So I thought, let's try with just the eye movements and no talking to her, and her focus was much better in an effective session. All right. If it worked, it works. It's. I think you sort of answered your own question there. Now, the reason why I tell people to keep thinking about the memory is because what can happen is they are just watching your finger. So generally, if I'm just moving my finger and their eyes are just following my finger, there's no deviations, there's no blips, there's no blinking. In my experience, I have found that client is not thinking about the memory. They are simply watching my finger. And so therefore, no change is taking place. That is why I repeat, think about this. And this is why I take labels for things. Think about this. Think about hold this memory for as long as you can. Okay, let's look at some of these comments. What am I doing? Do you take notes during the session? Do you use forms? Is it useful to note on a whiteboard and a client can see it? Why? No. Okay, so yes, I do take notes. I take notes of basically what I've done, the labels. So simple pattern or intro pattern on this. I've taken that. And so in Andy's latest training, he doesn't take down submodalities. I do. I find it effective, and it's the way that I do it. And then I make a note of these to what they change to as well. I then basically, if I'm doing notes for, can I press return? If I'm doing, 1 second. So if I'm doing, let me just make some notes here. So if I'm doing, let's just say anger, I'm going to first of all find out how strong it is out of 10. I'm then going to go to first imprint. I give it a label, let's say door, and I'll often take the age as well, so 12. And then recalibration, let's say 4 out of 10. Second imprint, school, 11. Then third imprint is, or recalibration is 3, so I'll finish it. So basically, the kind of level of notes I take is this. So that's what I take. And also, after the session, I always leave myself 10 minutes time to actually write up any kind of thoughts from the session as well, any observations I've made as well, to do with their demeanor, any kind of changes in sort of facial flushing, just that kind of stuff. So I do have those notes as well. Uh, but all right, so Nuno, but should he go to the age he told or to the first previous time? Okay, right. Experiment, Nuno, and see how it works. I would, if somebody tells me this age is 8 years old for an identity, I think it's best to get them to go to that age. Okay? I think it's best to get them to go to that age. Pattern of chronicity, if they say they can't think about the memory whilst moving your fingers. Oh yeah, I think it was because they couldn't think about the memory whilst they were being reminded to think about the memory. Or you can't think about the memory while you're telling me to. Yeah, it could be a pattern of chronicity. Could be. Any other questions at all? Any other questions? Any other questions? How we measure that we have changed to the how we measure that we have changed the pattern of chronicity. I don't even know how to answer. How we measured that we changed the pattern of chronicity. Okay, so when we think what a pattern of chronicity is, so let's take Maybe Man. How I know that that's working is because they will start to self-correct. They will actually start to self-correct. When we're looking at cause and effect, it's when I can get them to be quiet and they're actually giving me direct answers and we're actually making progress there. Um, Again, it's the same with looking for what remains as opposed to what's changing by getting them to understand that things are changing and getting them to admit that those things are actually changing. So that's the measure which I'm kind of looking for. With the three-stage abreaction or overreaction, I've got the emotion which I'm going to work with. So those tests are also going to be how they live their life after the session as well. So that's why it's always really important to review what's happened since the session to see how they've been during that week. But I'm really using the patterns of chronicity to actually get to the emotions and the underlying structures that they have. So for me, a pattern of chronicity is that some sort of behavior, but the behavior is the actions of something that lies beneath. And I want to get to the thing that lies beneath. Does that make sense? So you can't always measure it by a scale of 1 to 10. Sorry, I got an email there. Let's get rid of that. Costa Coffee, you've got a new menu. Any other questions at all? I think I've watched all of those ones. Do, 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 do. Can we use lazy 8 in a pattern of chronicity as an identity? For example, how old? I won't do that. Any other questions? There's one there, I think. Oh, no, it's me. Any other questions? Next Tuesday is going to be, we're going to look at the PSACs. So we're going to do a bit of a coaching session around PSACs, obviously any other questions. And then we'll be doing demonstrations with that as well. Can you do lazy 8 for a pattern of chronicity? Well, the thing is, right, okay, so with this, with a pattern of chronicity, I'm actually trying to tease stuff out. So I wouldn't do how old is maybe man. So if I'm working with somebody and they're very indecisive and stuff like that, and they're getting scared or aggravated, I can work with these things. Absolutely. But I wouldn't do it directly on the pattern of chronicity like a maybe man. not directly, but things that come out from that, then yeah, you could. Okay, I think we are done. I'll see you this time next week, guys. It's been beautiful as always. So I will see you soon. Like I say, there is a training this weekend. I do have a spare place. Somebody's moved, so I do actually have a place available. You can book it directly online, or you can just message me and I'll sort it out with you. Cool. See you later.